My name is Bella Ray, and this is the story of the night my family finally told me I didn't belong. I arrived at my younger sister's wedding, expecting the usual charade, plastering on a smile, posing for the cameras, playing the part of the supportive older sister. But from the moment I stepped into that ballroom, everything felt off. The venue was stunning, a grand hotel in downtown Chicago, glittering with chandeliers and draped in white roses. A string quartet played softly in the background, the air thick with the scent of peonies and expensive perfume. Everything about this night was designed to be perfect, everything except for me. I paused at the entrance, smoothing down my emerald dress and trying to ignore the tightness in my chest. This wasn't my night, it was Lila's, and she deserved to shine. I'd accepted long ago that I wasn't the favored daughter, but I hadn't expected them to remind me so blatantly. I approached the check-in table, where a bright-eyed wedding planner greeted me with a rehearsed smile. "Name!" She chirped, her voice sugar-sweet. "Bella Ray." I replied, calm and steady, even as my stomach twisted into knots. Her smile faltered for just a moment, her fingers hesitating on the seating chart. I saw it, the quick flash of pity in her eyes. I'd seen it so many times before. "Oh, right. Here you are," she said, handing me a small place card with a forced brightness. "Your table is just over here." I followed the direction of her hand, my heart sinking, as I realized she was pointing not to the grand ballroom filled with laughter and clinking glasses, but to a dim hallway near the coat racks. My table was outside the main reception hall. Not even in the corner of the room, no, they'd pushed me right out the door. At first I thought it had to be a mistake. Surely there was no way my own family would treat me like an afterthought at my sister's wedding. But as I scanned the seating chart, I saw the truth spelled out in elegant cursive. My parents, Walter and Margot Ray, were seated at the front beside the bride and groom. Lila's friends, even her colleagues, had seats in the main hall. My name was nowhere to be seen. The message was clear. "You're not welcome here." I found my mother in the crowd, standing beside Lila as she fussed over the train of her wedding dress. Lila looked radiant, bathed in soft candlelight and attention. She caught my gaze, tilted her head just slightly, and smirked. That smirk told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't an accident. This was deliberate. I took a deep breath and approached my mother. "Mom," I said softly, willing my voice not to tremble. "Can I talk to you for a moment?" Margot barely glanced at me. "Now's not the time, Bella. Can't you see we're busy? It'll only take a second." I insisted, teeth gritted against the humiliation burning in my chest. She sighed, visibly annoyed, but obliging. Lila didn't move. She stood there, eyes glittering, watching me with that same cold amusement. I checked my seat, I said. "It's in the hallway, outside the ballroom." Margot let out a dismissive little laugh. "We had to prioritize immediate family members at the main tables." "Bella." "I am immediate family." I said the words slipping out sharper than I meant them to. "Oh, don't be so dramatic," she murmured, brushing a non-existent wrinkle from Lila's dress. Lila's eyes met mine, full of mock sympathy. "That's so unfortunate," she said sweetly. "But you know how wedding planning can be, so many little details to get wrong." I turned back to my mother, desperate for her to see how much this hurt. "Mom, you really think it's okay for me to be shoved out of the reception, away from everyone?" She sighed again, her eyes already flicking back to Lila. "Bella, don't make a big deal out of this. It's Lila's special day. Just be grateful you're here." Grateful. The word sat heavy and bitter in my throat. Grateful for being treated like a stranger at my own sister's wedding. Grateful for being reminded once again that I was always second best. Before I could say another word, my father Walter finally spoke up. "It's just seating, Bella," he said, not even looking at me. "Let's not ruin the evening." That was it. The final blow. I didn't bother replying what was the point. My father had never defended me, and he wasn't about to start now. I turned away, my pulse hammering in my ears. The ballroom around me was alive with music and laughter, but I felt like I was standing in a world of glass, every movement threatening to shatter me completely. I walked away from them, clutching the place card so tightly, the corners bit into my palm. My table, my humiliating little seat by the coat racks, waited for me, but I didn't move toward it. Instead, I lingered at the edge of the room, staring at the golden glow of the chandeliers and the glimmering dance floor. It wasn't just about tonight. It was about every birthday party, every holiday, every family dinner, where I'd been expected to smile and nod and keep the peace while Lila took center stage. It was about years of being the quiet one, the dependable one, the one who never made waves. And tonight, they'd shown me exactly where I stood in their perfect little world. I took a deep breath, feeling a hot sting in my chest that wasn't entirely new. This was just another wound in a lifetime of quiet hurts. But this time, I wasn't sure I could keep pretending it didn't matter. As I stood there lost in the shadows of that glittering ballroom, I realized something. I'd spent so long trying to belong to a family that didn't want me. But tonight, I saw the truth. I wasn't the problem I never had been. And maybe, just maybe, I was done trying. I didn't sit at my assigned table that night. Instead, I wandered along the edge of the celebration, moving like a ghost in a room full of laughter and clinking glasses. My name card lay forgotten on a tray, somewhere a silent testament to how little they cared. The wedding was in full swing. Lila was radiant, every movement of her body choreographed to perfection. Her smile, her laughter, even the way she leaned into her new husband Tyler, as if they were already posing for a lifetime of staged photographs. But I could see the cracks. The tightness in her jaw whenever she thought no one was looking. The way she scanned the room for approval like it was oxygen. I drifted past tables of old family friends and distant relatives who barely remembered my name. Some offered tight smiles, others didn't bother to look my way at all. I felt invisible, but there was a strange freedom in that invisibility, a chance to see the truth no one else wanted to acknowledge. Near the bar, I spotted Aunt Cecily. She was sipping champagne and watching the dance floor with a calculating look. When she saw me, her eyes softened. "Bella," she said, her voice warm. "They really did put you out in the hallway, didn't they?" I managed a brittle smile. "Looks that way." Aunt Cecily's gaze sharpened. "That's not right, you know. You deserve better." Maybe I said, "But I'm tired of expecting them to see that." She tilted her head, studying me for a moment. "Sometimes the only way to change a story is to stop playing your part in it." Her words lingered in the air, sharp and true, and for a moment I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in years, resolve. As she drifted away to join another conversation, I felt a hand on my arm. It was Tyler's cousin Mason, his expression troubled. "Bella," he said, his voice low. "I need to tell you something." I hesitated, caught off guard by the urgency in his eyes. "What is it?" He glanced around, lowering his voice even more. "I overheard your father and Lila talking earlier. About, about you." My stomach tightened. "What did they say?" Mason exhaled, his brow furrowing. "It wasn't just about the seating. Lila, she wanted you out of the way tonight. She said she didn't want you stealing her spotlight." I let out a hollow laugh. "Stealing her spotlight, as if that's ever been my goal." "I know," Mason said quickly. "I know it's not fair. But there's something else." He hesitated, then pulled out his phone. "I saw this in a group chat she didn't think I was part of." He showed me the screen messages from Lila to her bridesmaids, mocking me for everything from my dress to my hair, to how she'd made sure I'd be seated in the hallway so I wouldn't ruin her perfect night. My name in bold letters, a punchline in a cruel joke. The words burned, not because they were new, but because they were so final proof of what I'd always suspected, but had never dared to believe fully. "Thank you for showing me," I said softly. Mason looked relieved, like he'd been carrying that weight for hours. "Don't let it ruin your night," he said, touching my arm lightly. "You deserve better than this." I nodded, but inside something was shifting. The quiet ache of years of being the afterthought was turning into something else, something harder, sharper. I needed air. I slipped out a side door and into the crisp night, the cold hitting my skin like a jolt. The city glittered beyond the courtyard, alive and indifferent. I closed my eyes, breathing in the cold and trying to steady the chaos inside me. That's when I heard the laughter, faint but unmistakable. I turned and saw Lila standing just inside the doorway, her phone in her hand, her friends clustered around her like courtiers. She was showing them something on the screen, and they were laughing. At me, I realized. Always at me. For a moment, I almost walked back inside and confronted her right there in front of everyone. But then I remembered Aunt Cecily's words. Sometimes the only way to change a story is to stop playing your part in it. I didn't go back inside. Instead, I walked around to the front of the building where the valet was helping guests with their cars. My mother was there, her arms wrapped in a silk shawl as she oversaw everything, like the queen she believed herself to be. "Mom!" I said, my voice steady. She turned startled. "Bella! What are you doing out here? Go back inside." "No," I said simply. "I'm done pretending tonight." Her mouth tightened. "Don't be dramatic. Lila's worked so hard for this day." "I know," I said, "but I'm done making myself small so she can shine." Margot's eyes narrowed. "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means I'm leaving," I said. "I'm not going to sit out here in the hallway and pretend it doesn't matter." Her lips parted, a flicker of something regret anger crossing her face. "Bella, don't make this about you. Don't embarrass me." I let out a soft, incredulous laugh. "Embarrass you, Mom? I've spent my whole life making sure you weren't embarrassed by me. And tonight, I'm done." I turned and walked away before she could say another word. I didn't need her approval anymore. For the first time, I realized I never really had. As I reached the edge of the courtyard, I spotted Tyler standing there, his expression tight. When he saw me, he stepped forward. "Bella," he said quietly, his brow furrowing. "I saw what they did to you tonight." "I'm sorry." I shrugged the weight of it all, suddenly feeling so much lighter. "It's not your fault," I said. "It's not about you or this wedding. It's about me. And I'm done letting them decide my worth." Tyler nodded, his eyes searching mine. "You're stronger than they'll ever admit." "Maybe," I said softly, "but I'm not here to prove anything anymore." I turned back to the glittering lights of the ballroom, where the party was still going strong. I could hear the music thumping, the laughter echoing through the night. It felt like a world I was never really a part of, and tonight I didn't mind. As I walked down the front steps, I felt the chill of the wind against my skin, sharp and clean. For the first time in years, I felt something else too: freedom. This wasn't just about a wedding or a cruel seating chart. It was about finally seeing the truth of my family, the truth of myself. And as I stepped away from the glittering facade they'd built, I knew one thing for sure: this was only the beginning. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I booked a room at a small hotel overlooking the river, the neon glow of the city outside my window, a silent witness to my decision. As I sat on the edge of the bed, the events of the night replayed in my mind like a broken record: the cold dismissal in my mother's eyes, the laughter of Lila's friends echoing in my ears, Mason's quiet apology. I stared at my phone, the screen dark and accusing. Missed calls from my mother. A single text from my father. "Don't make this a bigger deal than it is." I let out a slow breath, setting the phone down. I wasn't going to argue with them anymore. Not tonight. Maybe not ever again. The next morning, I woke to the sharp knock of housekeeping at the door. I took a long shower, washing away the last traces of the wedding from my skin. When I stepped out, the woman in the mirror looked different somehow. Her eyes were clearer, her shoulders straighter. I got dressed and walked to a nearby cafe, the air crisp and cool against my face. I ordered a coffee and sat by the window, letting the quiet hum of morning traffic steady my racing thoughts. Halfway through my drink, I felt a presence at my side. I looked up to see Mason standing there, hands shoved in his pockets. "I thought I might find you here," he said. I raised an eyebrow. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep," he admitted. "I wanted to make sure you were okay." I smiled faintly. "I'm fine, Mason." "Really?" He sat down across from me, his eyes searching mine. "Bella, what happened last night? It wasn't just about a seat or a stupid chart. You know that, right?" I nodded. "I know. It was about all the times I was told to be quiet, to smile, to stay in my place. And I'm done with that." He leaned back in his chair, a small smile flickering across his face. Good. You deserve so much better than what they gave you. For a moment, we sat in silence, the morning sun warming our faces. Then, Mason's expression shifted, something flickering in his eyes. There's something else you should know, he said quietly. I didn't want to say it last night, but there are rumors about Lila. I frowned. What kind of rumors? He hesitated, then pulled out his phone. I heard from a friend of mine that Lila's been talking to someone else. Not just flirting, really talking. Like, planning something. The words settled like a stone in my chest. Are you sure I didn't want to believe it? He said. But it's not the first time I've heard it. And after seeing how she treated you last night, I think you deserve to know. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the weight of it sink in. Lila had always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. But even golden children have cracks in their crowns. Thank you for telling me, I said softly. I don't know what I'll do with it, but thank you. He reached across the table, his hand warm on mine. Whatever you decide, I've got your back. I smiled, grateful for the small kindness in a world that had so often felt cold. Later that afternoon, I decided to stop by my parents' house. I needed to see them, not for answers, but for closure. I parked my car at the end of the long driveway, the familiar brick facade of the house looming in front of me, like a monument to everything I'd tried so hard to belong to. Inside the house was quiet. I found my mother in the kitchen, arranging flowers in a crystal vase. She looked up as I entered, her expression flickering with surprise, and just maybe a hint of relief. Bella, she said, I wasn't expecting you. I shrugged. I thought I'd come by. I wanted to see for myself if there was anything left to salvage. Her mouth tightened. Bella, you're making too much of this. It was one night. It was never just one night, I said, my voice calm. It's been years of being the one you forgot. Years of letting Lila's needs and wants eclipse everything else. She flinched but didn't deny it. You know how Lila is, she said finally. She's delicate. She needs more. And what about me? I asked. What have I ever needed from you that was too much? For a moment, she didn't answer. She just stared at the flowers in the vase, her hands tightening around the stems. I don't know, she whispered. I don't know how to be there for both of you. I let out a soft sigh, the ache in my chest familiar, but no longer suffocating. I don't need you to be there for me anymore, I said. I just need you to stop pretending I don't exist. She looked up at me, then really looked, and for the first time in years, I saw the cracks in her perfect facade. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I should have seen you. I know, I said, my voice gentle, but I see me now. And that's enough. I turned and walked out of the kitchen, past the photos lining the hallway. Lila's graduation. Lila's sweet 16. Lila's engagement. My face was there too, always on the edge of the frame. Always the afterthought. But as I stepped outside into the cool evening air, I felt something shift inside me. For the first time, I wasn't defined by those frames. I wasn't defined by their approval or their neglect. I was defined by me, and that was enough. I drove back to the city as the sun set behind me, the skyline glowing in shades of gold and crimson. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a message from Aunt Cecily. Come by my place tomorrow. We need to talk. I smiled. Cecily had always been the one who saw me, even when no one else did. Maybe it was time to see what kind of family we could build, one not bound by blood, but by choice. As the city lights flickered to life, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, hope. And with that hope came a quiet promise to myself I would never let anyone push me into the shadows again. This wasn't the end. It was the start of something new. And this time, I wasn't going to let anyone else write my story for me. The next morning, I arrived at Aunt Cecily's townhouse just after sunrise. The air was crisp, and the city was slowly waking up, the streets bathed in a soft golden light. I took a moment to steady my breath before knocking on her door, the weight of the past 24 hours pressing down on my shoulders. Cecily answered almost immediately, her warm smile a balm against the lingering ache in my chest. Come in, Bella, she said, ushering me into her cozy living room. The scent of fresh coffee and cinnamon filled the air, grounding me in the present. I'm glad you came, Cecily said as we sat down, her eyes kind but sharp. You've been carrying this alone for too long. I nodded, feeling the truth of her words settle deep in my bones. I just didn't know how to say it out loud, I admitted. I didn't want to be the one who ruined everything. Bella Cecily said gently, reaching across the table to take my hand. You're not the one who ruined anything. Lila made her choices, and so did your mother. You're just finally choosing yourself. I swallowed hard, blinking back tears I didn't want to shed. It's just, for so long, I thought if I was quiet enough, if I didn't cause trouble, they'd see me. But it never mattered, did it? No, Cecily said softly. It didn't. And that's not your fault. I let out a shaky breath. Mason told me something yesterday. He said there are rumors about Lila. That she's been talking to someone else. Not just flirting. Cecily's expression hardened. I heard something similar, actually. From a friend of mine who was at the wedding. Lila's been seen with someone else. It's not just a rumor, Bella, it's real. The words hit me like a slap. Part of me wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it after everything she'd done to push me aside. Lila's perfect world was already crumbling. Do you think Tyler knows I asked? Cecily shook her head. I doubt it. He's always been so blinded by her charm. But if it's true, he deserves to know. Just like you deserve to know the truth about your family. I sat back, the weight of it all settling over me. I don't know what to do with it, I confessed. I'm not sure it's my place. Maybe not, Cecily said. But if you decide to tell him, make sure you're doing it for the right reasons, not because you want revenge, but because he deserves the truth. I nodded, her words echoing in my mind. Thank you, I said quietly, for always being there for me. Cecily smiled. That's what family does, Bella. Real family, anyway. Later that day, I went for a walk along the riverfront, the city's skyline reflected in the water, like a promise of something new. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a message from Lila. We need to talk. I stared at the words for a long moment, before typing back, I'll meet you at the old cafe. 1 hour. The cafe was empty when I arrived, the scent of roasted coffee beans mingling with the faint sweetness of pastries in the display case. I chose a table near the window, my heart pounding in my chest. Lila arrived a few minutes later, dressed in a tailored coat that screamed money and status. She looked tired, her eyes shadowed, and her movements brittle. Bella, she said, sliding into the seat across from me. You've made quite the scene. I raised an eyebrow. Funny, I thought I was the one who was supposed to stay quiet. Lila's jaw tightened. You don't understand how hard it's been for me. All the pressure, the expectations. Mom and Dad never expected anything from you, but me, I had to be perfect. I let out a soft laugh, shaking my head. Lila, I spent my whole life trying to be invisible so you could shine. Don't you dare tell me how hard it's been for you. She flinched, but quickly recovered. This isn't about you, she snapped. You're just jealous. You always have been. No, I said calmly. I'm not jealous. I'm just done. She stared at me, her eyes flashing with something between anger and desperation. You don't know what it's like, Bella. Always having to be the one who makes everyone else proud. I know exactly what it's like, I said, my voice steady. I've lived it too, just in a different way. But the difference is, I'm not willing to destroy everyone around me just to keep the spotlight. Lila's lips parted, but no words came out. For the first time, I saw the cracks in her carefully crafted facade, the fear, the insecurity she'd spent her whole life hiding. Before either of us could speak again, the door to the cafe swung open and Tyler walked in. His eyes landed on Lila, then flickered to me. I figured you'd be here, he said quietly. Lila's face drained of color. Tyler, he held up a hand. Save it, Lila. I know everything. She froze, her mouth opening in a silent gasp. What? What are you talking about? He pulled out his phone, his face hard. The messages, Lila. The late-night phone calls. You didn't even bother to cover your tracks. I watched her shoulders sag, the weight of her lies finally pressing down on her. I was going to tell you, she said, her voice small. I didn't know how. Tyler shook his head, his expression unreadable. You weren't going to tell me. You were going to keep playing your game until you got bored. And I'm done being your pawn. For a moment, there was only silence heavy and suffocating. Then Lila's gaze snapped to me, her eyes blazing with fury. This is your fault, she spat. You've always wanted to ruin me. I met her gaze calm and unflinching. No, Lila, you ruined yourself. Tyler looked at me, his eyes softening. Bella. I'm sorry, he said. For not seeing it sooner, for not seeing you. It's okay, I said quietly. We all see what we want to see, until we can't anymore. Lila let out a bitter laugh, her hands trembling. You think you've won, don't you? You think you're better than me. No, I said, standing slowly. I don't have to be better than you. I just have to be better than who I used to be. As I walked out of the cafe, the winter sun breaking through the clouds, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The past was still there, but it no longer defined me. And as I stepped into the cold, I realized something important. This was my story now. And I was finally ready to live it on my own terms. I didn't go straight home after the cafe. I needed time to process everything: Lila's betrayal, Tyler's quiet devastation, the realization that I wasn't the one who needed fixing. I wandered the city streets, the winter wind biting at my skin, the rhythm of traffic, and footsteps, a strange comfort in the chaos. By the time I returned to my apartment, the sun was setting, painting the skyline in shades of rose and gold. I sank onto the couch, staring out at the city lights, blinking to life. My phone buzzed with messages, some from my mother, some from numbers I didn't recognize, all variations of the same desperate question: why I didn't have the answers they wanted. I only had the truth. And the truth didn't come with neat explanations. A soft knock at my door startled me. I rose slowly, crossing the room to peer through the peephole. To my surprise, it was Mason holding a paper bag from my favorite bakery. I thought you might need a friend, he said. When I opened the door, his smile gentle. I stepped aside to let him in the warmth of his presence, easing some of the tightness in my chest. You always know exactly what to say, I murmured. Not always, he admitted, setting the bag on the counter. But I do know that after a night like last night, you deserve pastries and a listening ear. I let out a soft laugh, the sound surprising even me. You're a good man, Mason. He shrugged, his gaze steady. I just think you've spent enough time trying to be perfect for everyone else. It's time someone was there for you. I poured us both coffee, and we settled into the worn comfort of my couch, the sweet smell of cinnamon rolls filling the room. For a while, we talked about everything but the wedding, our favorite songs, the books we'd loved as kids, the quiet dreams we'd tucked away for too long. And when the conversation finally turned back to Lila, Mason's expression grew serious. Tyler deserves to know everything, he said softly. Not just what she did to him, but how she's treated you your whole life. I know, I said, my fingers tracing the rim of my coffee mug. But I'm done being the messenger. If he wants the truth, he'll find it himself. Mason nodded, a flicker of pride in his eyes. That's fair. But what about your mother? Will you talk to her? I hesitated, the question hanging heavy in the air. She's called a dozen times today, I said finally. But I don't know what she wants, if she wants to apologize or just smooth it over. Maybe it doesn't matter, Mason said gently. Maybe what matters is what you want. I looked at him, really looked, and realized he was right. For the first time in my life, it wasn't about them, it was about me. About what I needed, what I deserved. The next morning, I decided to face the final chapter head on. My mother had left me a message the night before. Please come home. We need to talk. The tone of her voice was different, less cold, more unsure. It felt like a crack in the armor she'd worn all my life. When I pulled up to the family home, I sat in the car for a long moment, gathering my courage. The house looked exactly as it always had, grand and imposing, the perfect facade for a family that had always been more performance than reality. I stepped inside the quiet of the entryway, swallowing me whole. My mother was waiting in the living room, her hands twisting together, her face pale. Bella, she said, her voice soft. Thank you for coming. I nodded, not offering a smile. I'm here because I need to be, not because you asked. She winced but didn't argue. I know I hurt you, she said, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I've spent so long trying to keep this family together, trying to make everything look perfect. But in the process, I forgot you. I forgot how much you needed to be seen. The words were like a balm and a wound all at once. You didn't just forget, I said quietly. You chose not to see me, again and again. A tear slid down her cheek. I know. And I'm so sorry, Bella. I don't know how to make it right. I took a deep breath, the old ache in my chest loosening. Maybe you can't, I said. Maybe some things don't need to be fixed. They just need to be acknowledged. She nodded slowly, her shoulders sagging. You're right, she whispered. I see that now. I let the silence stretch between us heavy, but not suffocating. Finally, I said, I don't know what happens next. But I know I can't keep pretending anymore. I can't keep shrinking to fit into a place that was never mine. My mother looked at me with something like pride in her eyes, pride and sorrow tangled together. Then don't, she said. Don't shrink anymore, Bella. I nodded once the finality of it settling over me like a warm blanket. I won't. As I walked out of the house, the winter sun broke through the clouds, casting a soft glow on the world around me. My phone buzzed in my pocket, this time it was Tyler. Thank you for everything he'd written, for showing me the truth. I smiled faintly, my heart lighter than it had been in years. I didn't reply. Some things didn't need words. Some things were better left to the quiet knowing. Mason called later that afternoon, his voice warm and steady. How did it go? He asked. I thought of my mother's face, the way her shoulders had finally dropped under the weight of her own illusions. It went the way it needed to, I said. And that's enough. Proud of you, he said softly. Thank you, I whispered, for everything. We hung up and I stood at my window, watching the city shimmer in the fading light. My family wasn't what I wanted it to be, but maybe that was okay, because I wasn't who I used to be either. This was my life now, messy and complicated, and painfully real. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of it. As the night crept in, I felt something shift inside me, a quiet strength, a steady pulse of hope. I didn't need to be anyone's afterthought anymore. I didn't need to beg for a seat at their table, because I finally understood the only seat that mattered was the one I made for myself. A week later, I sat in my tiny apartment, surrounded by boxes I hadn't touched in months. Old photos, childhood trinkets, half-finished journals that had always felt like they were written by someone else, a girl who spent her life trying to be what everyone else needed. I picked up one of those journals, flipping through the pages with a small, bittersweet smile. Each entry was a plea for validation, every word carefully measured to avoid offending anyone. I closed it gently, feeling a quiet grief for the girl I used to be, and a quiet triumph for the woman I was becoming. Outside my window, the city pulsed with life. Horns blared, people laughed on street corners, the world moving forward in its beautiful, messy way. I realized then that for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was on the outside looking in. I was part of it, messy, real, and unafraid. A soft knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. When I opened it, Mason stood there with a small potted plant cradled in his arms. For you, he said, smiling. A little bit of green for your new beginning. I took it, feeling the soft weight of it in my hands. Thank you, I said. It's beautiful. He stepped inside, glancing around the room at the half-packed boxes. Moving out or moving on? He asked gently. Maybe a little of both, I said, setting the plant on the windowsill. I'm not sure where I'm going yet, but I know it won't be backward. Mason's smile widened. That's all that matters. We sat down on the couch, sharing coffee and quiet laughter. For a while, we didn't talk about family or betrayals or the scars they left behind. We talked about dreams instead, the trips we wanted to take, the stories we wanted to write, the futures we dared to imagine. At some point, Mason took my hand in his thumb tracing small circles on my palm. I want you to know something, Bella, he said softly. You're not alone. You never were. Even when you felt invisible. My heart caught in my throat. Thank you, I whispered, for seeing me. Always, he said, his voice low and steady. Always. Later that evening, my phone buzzed with a message from my mother. "I'm proud of you," it read, "for standing up for yourself, for choosing your own path." I stared at the words for a long moment, feeling the ache of years of silence finally start to heal. I didn't know what our relationship would look like moving forward, if it would ever truly be what I'd hoped for. But for the first time, I didn't need her validation to feel whole. I set the phone down and took a deep breath, letting the quiet of the night wash over me. In the corner, the little plant Mason had given me sat in a patch of moonlight, its green leaves unfurling toward the promise of something new. I walked over to the window, looking out at the city, at the lights that stretched on forever, at the possibilities that shimmered in every shadow. I thought about the wedding, about the way Lila had looked at me, with such bitterness and fear, and I realized something: her power over me had never been real. It had only ever been the power I gave her, and I was done giving it. I didn't need to be the golden child or the perfect daughter. I didn't need to be anyone's safety net. I only needed to be myself unapologetically, fiercely, and completely. A week later, I stood in front of my old family home one last time. The air was cold, the sky heavy with snow that hadn't yet fallen. I slipped a small envelope into the mailbox, a letter to my parents. In it, I didn't ask for forgiveness or promise to come home. I told them who I was now and who I would never be again. I turned away, feeling the finality of it in my bones. My breath fogged in the air as I walked down the steps, each footstep echoing the quiet certainty in my chest. This wasn't an ending, it was a release. And as I stepped onto the sidewalk, the wind carrying away the last remnants of who I used to be, I felt free. That night, Mason and I sat on the couch, the city glowing behind us. He poured me a glass of wine, the red liquid catching the light like a promise. "To new beginnings," he said, raising his glass. I clinked mine against his, the soft sound ringing in the quiet room. "To new beginnings," I echoed. We sat there, the silence comfortable, our laughter easy. Outside, snow began to fall in soft, silent flakes, blanketing the world in white. It felt like a fresh start, like the universe was giving me a blank page to fill with whatever I chose. As the night deepened, I realized that this was what I'd been searching for all along: not a perfect family or a flawless life. Just this, the quiet certainty of knowing who I was and what I was worth. I leaned back, closing my eyes, and let the truth settle in my bones. I didn't need to prove myself to anyone anymore. I didn't need to earn my place in the world. I was already enough. And as the snow fell and the city shimmered, I made a silent promise to myself to keep choosing me every single day. To anyone out there who's ever felt like they didn't belong, who's ever felt invisible in the spaces that should have felt like home, I hope you hear this. You don't have to keep shrinking to fit. You don't have to keep playing a part in someone else's story. You deserve to be the main character of your own life, to take up space, to speak your truth, to choose yourself. So let me ask you, have you ever walked away from a place or a person that didn't see your worth? Have you ever had to reclaim your seat at your own table? If this story resonates with you, drop a 1 in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to hear your story. And if you're ready for more raw, real, and powerful stories like this one, stories that remind you how strong you really are, hit that subscribe button and join me on this journey. Because remember, choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's survival.